Tall, confirm on your end that you see it okay, streaming. So I know, just an observation. Um, Other than, of course, Chuck, myself, and our guest speaker today, women have their camera turned on, men have their camera turned off. That's usually the opposite. So good job, ladies.
Does that mean I should turn
No, no, no. Keep keep yours on.
off my camera just to be everyone else?
Dan, I think we're having a connection issue over on your end.
Okay.
You're back. I think we're okay now.
Yeah. Let me open the door to this room just to make sure that's not preventing anything. All right.
Okay. 202. Let's get started. Chuck, kick us off.
Okay, so welcome to Rubbing Elbows episode. I don't even know what episode it is anymore, but we've got Dan Tenenbaum, who is one of the commissioners for the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles. Very happy to have you on. Welcome.
Do we still have you, Dan? We see him, but I think he's frozen.
Who's in charge of his Wi-Fi, Stacy?
All right.
There
Okay.
you go.
I just switched the Wi-Fi I was on. Hopefully this will help. Sorry about that. Not good when your guests speak. Technical issues.
No worries. I'm sure.
We've
Okay.
got Dan Tenenbaum, Commissioner of the LA Housing Authority. Welcome. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We've got so many topics to discuss. Got some breaking news to discuss. Where do we start? Let's talk about your journey.
Why don't we, before we even get started with the questions, and I think this time, since there is so much valuable information that Dan can share with us, some insider information from the LA housing, maybe we'll let him kind of, we'll start with, your story, how you got involved, a little bit of your background, and then we can kind of lead into maybe one or two other questions before you give us some breaking news.
Sounds good. So, I understand a lot of the community here is a real estate community, and that's where I've spent a good chunk of my career. So while when I moved to LA, I'm originally from Montreal, Canada. So I'm one of the many foreigners who are now Americans who are probably watching today. It started just like a lot of other people started in the business. It's kind of by chance and just an opportunity that came about. I was working for Disney when I first moved to LA. I was marketing their animated movies on video when there were still videos and just before DVDs and live streaming and everything else. And while I was at Disney working out of Burbank, I bought an apartment building, 14-unit apartment building with a few friends in Burbank. And I could easily go there at lunchtime. I was convinced that there was something special about the LA entertainment industry that generally would be an industry that would be strong longer term. And it just started off as an opportunity with a few people. And then, like a lot of other types of situations where chance meetings and whatnot can lead to opportunities, I was on a plane coming back from Montreal from, I think, one of the high holidays. And I see this guy who's my brother's age, who's a couple of years younger, who's an actor. I said, "Hey, you're my brother's friend." And we ended up sitting together. And I said, "Hey, we just bought this building." And he said, "Oh, well, you should talk to my dad." And he's got a group of people over in Montreal who have invested in real estate, and you should meet with them. And so the next time I went back to Montreal, I had overhead presentation, not even PowerPoint. I had was doing at this office building of all these people I never met before. And I said, this is the opportunity, and this is why I think LA is a good market longer term. This is back in 1996. And so at the time we were, buildings were being sold as REOs. People were losing their apartment buildings. It was a very unstable time. And yet I saw the opportunity there, and I qualified the people around the table saying, hey, this is the kind of returns we'd expect. This is the story why we believe that LA market and Burbank market is a strong one. And, if I found you a deal, would this be something that you'd be interested in? So part of it was qualifying ahead of time, these investors who I didn't know, should I, continue the discussion, or they were, were just interested because their son, one of their sons told them to come. But sure enough, around the table, I still remember to this day, in this boardroom, in this law office, in a high rise in Montreal, there they were all saying they'd be interested. And that was really my start. It was, through this chance meeting on the airplane. So, networking does matter. Being outgoing does matter. I went up to my brother's friend, said hello. And through that, this group of investors were my core initial investors that allowed me to expand the buildings. And of course, not of course, but I did not, my story is not the typical entrepreneurial story where I leveraged all my credit cards and used all my savings. This was a kind of lower risk kind of beginning where I said, okay, well, I still have a full-time job working at Disney. I'm going to try to build this business on the side. So I continued to work for Disney while I was buying these apartment buildings. And so, my 14-unit building was my first one. Then it became an 18-unit building, then a 22-unit building, and then a 36-unit building. And then when I got loan approval for my 76-unit building that I got under contract, that's when I gave notice to Disney. And then I knew I could work out of my corner of my kitchen in my little nook, make enough management fees to pay the rent. And I gave my notice right after getting the loan approval. And so that's what I've been doing full time ever since 1998. And so, and then I just grew the business. I'm basically what they call a real estate syndicator. I create a separate LLC or LP agreement for each building, and have expanded our portfolio. We bought, we sold. We're now we have a whole presence in the San Fernando Valley, from Burbank in our original start all the way up to Chatsworth, and then in the city as well, where we've expanded in the last 6 years in Koreatown and Silver Lake and East Hollywood areas. So, we're a medium-sized company. We're not huge. We're about 530 or so units across 13 buildings. And that's kind of by design. I've kind of kept that to a manageable size. As you know, I think a lot of people want to keep growing. Maybe it's my Canadian upbringing, or having lived in France, or I'm not sure, but I have always had this kind of balanced idea of my life. And so I've always been able to maintain time to do other things, including now that I have a family, do things with my family, and, being done by a certain amount of time. And at the end of the day, after doing this since, full time since 1998, I've kind of decided a bunch of years ago that I could continue to grow my business, and which I still plan on doing, or I can focus on saying, can I use my skills of real estate skills of being focused on this one industry and one city and for so long to make a difference in another way. And I had always had this interest in public policy. I was involved in student government. I was president of the Student Association at McGill University, where I'd gone for my undergrad, and that was representing 25,000 students. I'd been involved in the local Quebec, which is pretty volatile political scene, as well as some other types of civic and other types of work that I've done where I've lived. And this I felt was a good time to figure out a way to leverage all my knowledge about managing and owning apartment buildings to help others. And so what I've done is a little under 4 years ago, I was fortunate enough to be appointed by Mayor Garcetti to be a commissioner for the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles. And this has been really one of the best ways for me to give back to the community. And I'm happy to talk to you more about the Housing Authority. But that's kind of the background and why I have gotten to the point where I am now, where I'm spending, yes, my main job is still owning and acquiring and managing apartments, but I spend a good amount of time doing things in the real estate community for the for-profit world, for the Housing Authority, and the civic world, as well as the Jewish community.
I think this is the first time we can actually say that we have a speaker that officially fired Disney to move on to bigger and better things. So that's an incredible story. I'm actually familiar with Montreal. I used to have an office off of the Carry in Montreal when before the market meltdown. One of my branches in the lending was based out of there. So I love that city. It's a great,
where I grew up.
Yeah, it's a great town. Chuck, I think you were about to jump in with a question before I cut you off.
So a couple questions. I don't know which one to go with first. If it's to pitch properties to you in the San Fernando Valley, if people, are you guys still buying? That's definitely one question I want to hit, but maybe we can leave that till the end just so I don't forget. But the Housing Authority, is that something that people automatically associate with like what's going on with the homeless situation and how you guys are involved with, helping the situation?
Yeah, so first of all, just regarding all the brokers who may be watching this, we're not actively buying currently, so you don't have to email or call me just yet. But regarding the Housing Authority, yeah, we are. First of all, there's a lot of people get confused between the LA Housing Department and the Housing Authority. So if you're an apartment owner, the Housing Department is kind of where you pay your rent stabilization fees and your systematic code enforcement fees, and they're the ones who notify you if there's a tenant complaint. That's not us, so you don't have to complain to me about any of those things. The Housing Authority is an entity that oversees the whole Section 8 program, which is the largest rent subsidy program in the United States, and certainly the largest in the city of Los Angeles, as well as the public housing. And the way we get in, well, the number one way that we get involved with today's world of housing the homeless is that all of the local Measure HHH dollars that were allocated, everything that we've been paying in our taxes for the local City of LA homeless funds, all of that construction is contingent upon the Housing Authority approving prior to construction the fact that they are going to get the Section 8 vouchers upon completion. So what we do is we allocate these Section 8 vouchers ahead of time, committing them to the developer so that the risk of the developer's project goes down, and then they can go ahead and get the financing and approvals that they need to move forward. So without the Housing Authority, all of the new homeless housing that is coming out, and it's not coming out fast enough or enough of it, that's where we play a pivotal role. As in addition, as the kind of the overseers of public housing, most of the people in public housing, if they were not housed, they're some of the most at risk for homelessness. So it's important that we're able to, keep our folks in public housing from getting into a worse situation. And as of today's meeting, we've announced that we because of COVID and people's reduction in revenue, we've had to reduce we've had a 27% of our residents, we've had to reduce the amount that they pay in rent as their income has fallen. So again, we're getting additional funds from the federal government to be able to do that, but we're preventing anyone else from falling, at least that group of people falling into homelessness. So that's kind of one of the main ways that we get involved with the actual homeless dollars. And then me as a private apartment owner, and to anyone who's an apartment owner who may be watching this, there's really a lot of programs out there that are they're quite attractive to house the homeless. And we have done that even though we're market rate apartments, we're able to get market rate rents for homeless individuals that we're housing. And what we've decided to do in our company is to be able to take units that are maybe more difficult to rent or have high turnover, like our bachelors, which is basically almost like a motel room with a kitchenette, or smaller units that turn over quite a lot, like studios. And we are allocating some of our units to the formerly homeless, and we're getting full market rents. We're getting on-time payments every month. So it's a great way, especially today's world where a lot of apartment owners have higher vacancy, they have higher collection issues. There's great programs that are out there. I'm happy to if anyone contacts me afterwards to point them in the right direction. But there's this group that's kind of like a concierge for apartment owners called PATH, P-A-T-H, and they have a group that's what they do. They say, well, what kind of situation do you have? And they can put you in touch with the agency that's a homeless agency that meets your needs and fill up your vacancy and do what's right for our community at the same time.
So we were actually talking about that, you and I, last week, about how do we convey to apartment owners that Section 8 tenants might be a better alternative than just getting regular tenants and potentially having these tenants deal with COVID relief or not get paid at all. They can get market rent or close to market rent and get it on time every month, paid through vouchers, right?
Yeah, so the Section 8 program that you're talking about is just, that is not specific to the homeless situation, but, that nonetheless, apartment owners need to take another look at Section 8. And here's why. Well, first of all, just to understand the layout of apartment buildings in LA, it's important to understand that LA is very unusual compared to other markets. We're the second largest city in the United States, and yet 90% of the 87% of the buildings in the city of LA are 10 units and smaller. 72 units are 5 units and smaller. So when you have a 5-unit building and 1 or 2 of your residents are not paying, this is a serious issue for that small business, small owner. And so the question is for any apartment owner, but especially LA ones who tend to be on the smaller side on average, is listen, we've just gone through this. We're still going through the situation where our residents are having trouble paying. And when you have a smaller building, 1 person in a 5-unit building, you're have a 20% collection issue. People are having trouble are going to be having trouble paying their mortgage and their other expenses. So but all of the Section 8 tenants, they're all getting, if they had a reduction in their income, the amount that's coming from the Section 8 payment and from housing authority is increasing. So the landlords are made whole. So, if apartment owners are looking for a stable income and that's become more important to them, they need to take another look at today's Section 8. Just to give you an example, besides the reliable payments, we're really set up to, as soon as the inspection gets passed, to get you start getting paid right away. There's annual rent increase approvals where 90% of the rent increases are approved. The inspections that they have with this housing authority used to be every year. Now they're only every other year. And there's 1 phone number to call if there's ever issues with the resident. And the rents for a lot of these, the maximum rents is not bad. So if you have a 1-bedroom and you're charging for this year, it's $1,668 for a 1-bedroom. So yeah, if you have a fancy area, you're not going to be able to have a Section 8 tenant. But if you have a middle class building that has 1 bedroom and you're getting 1668 or less, Section 8 you'll probably qualify for a Section 8. And because of the CARES Act from the federal government, there's now they made it even more attractive in the last few months. Owners now will receive a $2,500 signing bonus if they sign with a new Section 8 tenant, and they can get up to 2 times the rent as a security deposit. So if there is an issue with getting paid or damage after someone moves out, you have further security than you would normally have. So I think
I have a question regarding the move out portion of it, if you don't mind.
Sorry, say it again.
I have a question regarding the move out portion. Is it, there's almost like, I don't know if it's a misconception or what, but people automatically assume that once you sign the lease with a Section 8 tenant, it's like a forever thing. They're rent controlled. You can't give it an end date. It's if you ever want to sell with them, they have the maximum relocation fee, things like that. Can you shed a little light on that?
Yeah, I mean there's some truth to it, but it's actually not that dissimilar from any RSO building. It's not that you have the same issue when you sign any lease with any rent stabilized property. You can't just tell someone to give someone a 60-day notice because they're not paying on time. It's the same issue with that whether it's Section 8 or not. The Section 8 has certain requirements in terms of just ticking off the boxes that HUD to make sure that the unit is habitable. So, it's a little more often than you might have with the city SCEP inspection that happens every 3 or 4 years to have someone every other year. But, generally speaking, the additional requirements are not that different from what the city's requiring anyway. So it's just making sure that it's every other year instead of every 3 or 4 years.
So, knowing that Section 8 is obviously very viable, but it's still a very small percentage amongst all apartment building owners, and knowing that so many are not taking advantage of this option, this section, do you see any data on your end that's indicating that a lot of building owners and apartment owners are not really going to be able to sustain the rents that they're losing right now, and potentially seeing more of these defaults coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I hear just what everyone else hears, and so I don't have any more information. But I will go back and say that LA has a lot of small owners, and so my sense is that LA, on average, the apartment owners will suffer more than Las Vegas, where it's dominated by large apartment complexes, for instance, often corporately owned, and so yeah, where they can spread the risk of non-payments over a lot larger number of units. So I don't have any other data than that. Right now, I don't think you're seeing foreclosures on apartments, but could that happen in the future? And that will provide some data. That's a real possibility.
Can we talk about the breaking news that we started talking about before we went live?
Yes. So Rubbing Elbows is on the cutting edge of the real estate world and what's happening today in Los Angeles specifically. We, as a housing authority, are the acquisition arm for everything city related now. So last year, we updated our acquisition program that will allow the housing authority to compete against guys like me and people like the men and women who are watching, who are in the apartment industry, where the housing authority can purchase an existing apartment building, and as the units turn, we can put Section 8 tenants in there. And as you may have, for those who kind of follow California affordable housing, or just generally in the news, it's crazy that the average cost for a quote unquote affordable unit is somewhere between $500,000 to $600,000 for a new development. And so finding different lower cost ways to increase the number of affordable housing, which our city really needs, is one of the key ways. And to me, the Housing Authority Acquisition Program, where we could be buying existing older apartment buildings that are closer to $200,000, $250,000, and we're already set up as an organization to asset manage those. We as a housing authority have a budget, and we can go ahead and purchase those buildings and be a great source for our city for affordable housing. Now, the breaking news is this: since we are now the acquisition arm of the city in coordination with the housing authority has applied for the California funds that are going to be available to acquire buildings that will be used to house those who are very at risk for at COVID, including the homeless and the very poor. And so the LA County has been allocated $161 million that could be available by the state, by the governor. And today's news is that as of the application cutoff date, we have applied with the state for 824 apartment units or motel units, representing about $146 million buildings. So these are buildings that we have signed letters of intent for, and that if we get approval, we'll be able to acquire, again, these older buildings. Some of them will be motels. I think 3 of them are motels that may already be leasing to the homeless. As you know, this is called Project Home Key, but there was another Project Room Key, that this is basically, there's some overlap where those buildings where the state was paying for the rent at these motels to house the formerly homeless. Now we'll be able to buy the hotels. And so we can permanently have those hotels as affordable units, and most likely ones that could be used for the homeless. So
what is the process in buying those?
Pardon me?
What is the process in buying those, like, or in presenting those to you guys or selling those to you guys?
So yeah, no, we have an acquisition group. There's going to be another round of funding from the state, about $100 million for the state. So even though a broker who may be watching today may have missed out on those one of those 824 units in our application, we still can. There's going to be another round, and so we can provide I can provide the contact information. I'm a board member, so I'm not involved in the day-to-day, but I'd be happy to put brokers in touch if they have either a hotel, a motel, or a vacant or almost vacant apartment. It can't be, we have to be able to go in there and use it and fill it up right away. It cannot be something where it's a full apartment building like the majority of apartment buildings out there. Those will not qualify.
Got it. Yeah, if there's a way, if you can put that in the comments or something, that'd be really great.
Be happy to do that.
That's something we definitely would love to, apply if we can. That's what we do. We're always looking for things, and if there's $100 million to be spent, we'd love to help you spend it.
So we'll open it up here in a moment for questions. I do have another question before we open it up. In terms of programs, are there any programs that are out there that you feel people are either not aware of or not taking advantage of, that either real estate agents, brokers, even developers that are watching can potentially benefit from, access to any kind of funds that are maybe not as advertised or things like that?
There is a lot. The only funds that I can think of are the funds related to the homeless housing. So there's oftentimes when you're reading about homeless housing, people read about new construction, but there's quite a lot of money to rent apartments and existing apartments. And they're getting, by the way, they're not left alone. They're getting support. It's called scattered site support. So rather than having an on-site, these new buildings typically have social workers and other kinds of related staff living or working right out of the new building that's 100% occupied by the homeless. But if you have just a general market rate apartment building, and you'll be surprised how much rent that you can get that these homeless organizations are paying. They provide, you can screen the applicants and making sure that you're comfortable with them. There's higher risk, I will say up front, with someone who's homeless. They'll most likely do probably have some form of criminal record of some sort, even whether it's loitering or drug use or something like that. So not to say that it isn't a higher use, but these are desperate times, number one, and number two, both for the homeless people and for apartment owners. And if you do your screening right, I think that contacting PATH, finding the right homeless agency for you would be a great way to fill up your building. And that to me is the one I think that apartment owners could be doing. A lot of them are not aware of these programs that are out there. they may know about Section 8, but they may not be familiar with today's Section 8, but they're familiar with Section 8. They may not know these very interesting programs that really were built to make them attractive. They know it's harder to convince apartment owners to rent to a homeless person, and so they've actually juiced up their programs to make it more enticing.
And are you guys in your department involved in any way with micro units, or can you shed any information regarding micro units? I'm starting to hear more and more about those.
Well, micro units are certainly something that the developers, I think, can do to solve that issue of reducing the cost per unit. My personal experience when we take these bachelors and we put in a kitchenette. So, we literally take when I say kitchenette, it's this integrated, 2-ring electric stove top with a sink on the top. And then there's a small fridge beneath it and a small little pantry area. I mean, that's it. And you just have to hook it up to electricity and plumbing. And for under $1,000, you're taking a small unit, and it's someone who's been sleeping on the street is very happy to have any place.
Right.
It may be a couple 250 square feet. So the micro units to me is a great way. I think most people are talking about micro units in terms of new housing production and development,
Right.
and these are the ones who are applying for funding for a lot of these projects. And yeah, there's micro units for me is a great way to increase the number of units for any given piece of land, to be able to put more units, and especially if no parking is going to be required, it's a great way to reduce the cost of housing.
Do you have any what's the word? The ability to push for parking requirements? Like, I know some builders will build like in the TOC tier 1, 2, 3, 4, take advantage of that. But you guys obviously don't build anything. You're not involved with anything that's gonna be built. Like if a builder wanted to approach you and say, "Hey, I'll build something per your, based on what you want, the amount of units, the way the kitchens are built, the way whatever, would they be open to that?"
Yeah, I don't think so. Just because we're focused on buying older existing buildings as opposed to developing new ones. So unfortunately, all of that measure HHH dollars, those projects that people have applied for, those funds have been allocated. The best way is to figure out, if you're a developer, to find out all the various programs that may be available, that developers could use. But unfortunately, a housing authority is not going to be a good source for that.
Okay, so I'm buying some of the older buildings. What's the lowest percentage rate as far as vacancy? You need to have at least 25% vacant. I mean, 75% vacant, or?
Well, there's two programs. So the program for this project Home Key, I don't have the exact percentage, but you're probably looking at 80% plus vacant. For the Housing Authority General Acquisition Program, to be able to put Section 8 tenants in, it doesn't have to even have we have no rules for that. It'd be better to have certain amount of, the higher the vacancy probably makes it more attractive for us, because we know we can put in Section 8 tenants right away. But sometimes we can purchase a building and convert existing residents who qualify, helping both the residents and actually increasing the rent roll by putting in a Section 8 voucher.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. That's very interesting. So you do have the ability as an owner, if you have tenants that are struggling, to qualify the building and the tenant at the same time for Section 8?
Yeah. If the Housing Authority purchases the building, we could offer either some form of Section 8 voucher to them that would enable them to decrease the amount that they pay, and potentially even increase the rent. So that comes just because of the types of maximum rents that I talked about earlier.
All right, so I'm going to open it up. I know we covered a lot, so hopefully there are still some questions out there. Does anybody have a question that you'd like to ask? All right, so I see Yaron. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, and then we got Michael. You're next. So Yaron, go ahead, introduce yourself and pose your question.
First of all, thank you, Leo and Chuck, for letting me be here. First time I'm joining this. I watched you almost every week, so glad to be part of it. Dan, thank you very much for your knowledge. It's been very informative. Thank you. Actually, it's a small question. And I'm not in the real estate industry. I'm in the construction industry. I'm looking to do development myself. But when Chuck asked you earlier if you're in market of buying, and you said no, not the time. Are you waiting? Are you expecting for the market to do some correction in the next few months, a year, or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's very personal. There's just it's not as much of a focus on for me as it may be for someone who's hungry and looking to grow. And in general, there may be some great buys today. You know, apartment. If you're looking, you know, if you have enough cash, it could be a good opportunity to purchase some smaller buildings towards the end of the year. I mean, some of these, I think some of these smaller owners are going to have trouble, and they're going to have to figure out. Some of them may need to get out, and so there. You know, even while I'm, you know, I'm not going to foresee. I'm not going to be the best person to say what's going to happen in the future. You know, my best guess is that there will be opportunities later this year or early next year to purchase smaller buildings, and just be aware that the lending requirements are a little stricter. So, you know, if you're buying an apartment building, that you're going to often have to put 1 full year of principal and interest payments up front. They're going to ask for your tax and insurance also paid up front. And so the amount of cash that you're going to need will go beyond what you normally would have to do to purchase. But, you know, in exchange, you may be getting a better deal. Right now, we're not seeing significant decreases in apartment values. Similarly, if you're in the market to buy a home, you're hearing the same thing. So it seems that there's a lot of waiting and seeing, despite the fact that apartment owners may be suffering right now.
So let me ask you to piggyback on what Yaron was asking. You know, and I come from the lending background, so I feel like if it's already tough and people are having a hard time, you know, holding on to a building and they have to sell, and then you add to it, it's hard for people to qualify because lending is getting tighter. Wouldn't that create even more opportunity on the pricing side from your experience?
Well, certainly, you know, if there's more supply because people are wanting to sell, that will definitely decrease it. My sense is there's still a lot of people that are who have cash, and so I'm not certain that the more stringent loan requirements that may require higher cash up front is necessarily going to be an impediment. So, you know, I don't know for sure, but that's my sense. There's a lot of cash waiting on the sidelines.
Okay, very good. Yaron, thank you for that. Michael, you had a question.
Hi, great. Hi, thanks for being here, Ted. Appreciate it. You mentioned at the very beginning about builders and developers building properties that are underwritten for Section 8 rents, and I think you were talking about what they can do to qualify for Section 8 vouchers in pre-development before they're completely entitled. I just wanted to learn if you can talk about that a little bit. I was under the impression that once the buildings are built, they can put the tenants on they can put the units on the market, and the market, you know, and be open for Section 8 tenants to come since there's such a high demand.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of ways to do it. The people who are building quote unquote affordable buildings typically have to secure upfront the Section 8 commitments. But if you're going to be developing where the market rate of your apartment building is within the Section 8 rent rules, you're absolutely right. There's no requirement for you to do that. If you're saying you'll take a Section 8 tenant, you know, you post on the Section 8 list, and you'll have a lineup of people at your door because there's huge demand for it. And so there's, you know, the approvals are typically necessary when the market rate that you're going to need is going to be higher than what the Section 8 normally would be able to provide because of the cost of construction, et cetera. But if you're just going to be able to figure out a way to, which is, by the way, a challenge, but if you can figure out a way to do that and build to get a Section 8 market rent, then more power to you, because I think that it'll be a successful business plan.
Well, the second part of that question is that, so if we're using the TOC model and leveraging the maximum number of units, et cetera, and reduce parking, it kind of brings us to a plan with much smaller units. So you're going to have smaller 2 bedrooms, smaller 3 bedrooms, even smaller 1 bedrooms. And so we're calculating the maximums that Section 8 will pay. And we're thinking that since it's going to be a brand new unit, we'll be able to get the highest rent that's available. Is that kind of safe to consider, even though the units maybe have it smaller than older traditional units?
I think, I mean, it's best to check because they look at you certainly don't want to do it without getting some form of security with that. They look at the geography, just so you know. So part of what the maximum rent for that area could max out below what you're protecting. So you don't want to get stuck in that situation. So part of it is zip code related. And then there may be some consideration for the size. So yeah, you should check with the housing authority before you make any underwriting decisions, or certainly before you start spending too much money.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Michael, thank you for that question.
I don't know if someone else is in line. This is a hypothetical situation that I feel like I have to run by you. So if someone owns like a 20-unit building, okay, and let's say, I don't know, 17 of his tenants are just not paying, they can't pay, they're going through whatever, this, that, and the other. Would that be a good candidate to approach that seller and say, hey, why don't you consider selling the building to City of LA?
Yeah, that's, definitely. And by the way, one of the things I didn't mention, we are set up to close quickly. So, one of the concerns that I think some sellers may have is saying, oh, well, if I sell to a private person, it'll go, at least, they may not be able to close, but I'll know quicker, and they should be able to close quickly if they have a good reputation. Well, the housing authority is set up to, we have actually a line of credit with City National Bank that we just approved for expansion. I'm just looking at my notes here. It looks like we have a $50 million line of credit with City National Bank. Plus we have the ability to bond ourselves at rates that are below Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So we're set up with a due diligence team. We're staffed up. We have the funds. We can close quickly. So yeah, they should be contacting us.
Okay. And then you would basically just come in, convert those tenants to Section 8 and let the other 3, write out their contract. We would
look to see who, we would first try to fill out all the vacancies with pulling people off of the Section 8 wait list. And then we would look at the existing residents to see what we could do with them. Yeah.
Okay, but buying a building, so I'm saying if there's 20 tenants there and let's say 17 of them are not paying, would you be able to underwrite it in a way like, okay, we can convert those 17 to Section 8 and buy it as a fully occupied building?
Yeah, I mean, we're at the end of the day, we're going to pay a market rate for it. There's sophisticated people on our end who are going to be able to look at it. At the end of the day, if they know that the market's going to pay X, maybe we can pay a little bit more than X, but they're not necessarily going to be paying as if everyone's paying fully. Is my sense.
Yeah. Okay.
I have a question for you, and if anybody else has a question, feel free to notify me so I can unmute you. But when you do buy a building, do you guys, when it comes to development or fixing the units or bringing it up to certain codes that maybe you require, how is that handled? Is that outsourced? Is that put out for bidding? Is that auctioned in a certain way, or how does that work?
Yeah, Leo, that's a good question, because the nature of buying an existing building is they may have deferred maintenance. Now, I think generally speaking, we would prioritize buildings with less deferred maintenance than others, but I certainly think that especially if you want to lower the cost per unit, which would include the cost to renovate, as the total, that we need to, that there will be some. And yeah, there's on the Housing Authority website there, if you wanted to become a vendor, so any want to get involved in any construction project, by the way, and there, we as a public agency are required to post opportunities, yeah, by law we have to post and make sure we have the utmost number of potential applicants. And so if you want to become a vendor and you're watching this, you go on the Housing Authority website and there's a section to say, you know, how to become a vendor, and you add your specialty and make sure you're on the email list for any RFPs that come out, including this kind of RFP.
That's very good for all our builders and contractors watching. That's good information. Thank you for that. Any other final questions? I know this is very interesting, so we've gone a little bit over time here, but I do want to give respect to our speaker with his time. But any final questions?
I mean, I've one more question that's lingering.
You can just keep them coming. I know you have a ton of them written down.
The concierge service, PATH. Okay, PATH, the concierge service. Is there someone that you can refer us to, someone that we can have like a direct communication with? Like, for example, we'd like to be someone who maybe takes on a property that's got a seller with like multiple problems. So if you've got a property owner that calls this concierge service PATH and says, hey, I've got tenants that are not paying, I've got one unit on fire, I've got a foundation problem, I don't know where to start, I don't know what to do. We'd like to be a buyer for that.
So, well, PATH is the organization to as a concierge to put a tenant in, and they'll need to inspect the unit and make sure that it's habitable according to their standards. So so it's not going to work where you can just not put any money in and just hope that the building's going to get filled. You know, similar to the Housing Authority, if they're going to purchase a building, if it's you know, we're too big of an organization to start buying a 20-unit building and start figuring out how to spend a ton of money on it. So that probably doesn't make sense either, that kind of situation. But if you can take that building, fix up the units to a level of habitability, and you want to have either, if you want to make sure that your building has a reliable source of income, you can turn to either the Section 8 program and or these various homeless programs.
Okay.
So we have one final question that was put in the chat to me over here from Eagle. He wanted to know if there is a minimum amount of units that is required for you to purchase.
For the Housing Authority to purchase a building, we don't have a specific amount. My sense is it's, you know, and as a board member, I'm encouraging them to make larger purchases. But, you know, I just described the landscape of LA, which, you know, often that's not realistic given the large number of smaller buildings. So my sense is if it's 20 units or larger, it would be something to show it to us. You know, I'd prefer they be buying larger buildings, but we have, I know we're underwriting and looking at buildings as small as 20.
Okay, very good. Well, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for taking the time to coming on our show, giving us some breaking news. That was a surprise for us as well. And really sharing the information and knowledge. It's been, I took a lot of notes, so I'm probably going to be following up with you after this session. I want to thank everybody for joining us again. Thank you for constantly coming back. We'll be here again next week, same place, same time. And we look forward to keep bringing you valuable information. Dan, thank you very much.
Happy to with you guys.
Thank you very much, Dan. I want to also acknowledge Sabrina Myers for connecting us. That was her idea to have you on. So
thank you, Sabrina,
for that.
Thank you, Sabrina.
And if anyone on here who knows somebody that'd like to appoint or someone you think that would be a great guest, please connect us. We'd love to have them on. And we'll see you next time, next Thursday at 2.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.